So even though I knew I was a homosexual from a very, very young age, from as far back as I can remember, I always had to keep it repressed. And it wasn't until I moved to Toronto to go to university in the 80s that I was able to explore my homosexuality. And after having after I had to repress it for so many years, it kind of came out in a big kind of explosion of sexual experimentation and some rage and some kind of wildness about exploring my sexuality. It also happened to correspond with gay liberation. So, you know, I came from a generation of homosexuals who really lived this idea of homosexual revolution in a way, like gay activism, visibility, fighting against homophobia, fighting for very basic rights, even just fighting for your life, you know. And I also grew up in the kind of AIDS era, so there was always that dark cloud hanging over our heads. So, you know, all that was very significant in my development as an artist. Well, from a very young age, I was really interested in cinema. My parents both had grade 8 educations. They weren't really, you know, formally educated, but they were both very into Hollywood cinema, and they knew everything about, you know, all the actors and extras and kind of all the Hollywood lore and legends and things, and they took us always to movies all the time, to drive-in movies, to the Saturday afternoon matinees, to the and so I always had, everyone in my family for some reason has a very strong connection to cinema. And in fact, one of my sisters, I have 3 sisters, one of my sisters has her PhD in literature, but she teaches film courses at a university. So, by the time I got to university, I majored in film and took film production, but I also was taking courses, like one of my first courses was protest literature and movements, and then I met the great Robin Wood. I was introduced to him at York University, who's a Marxist feminist gay film critic, and he became my mentor, and I took many courses with him at university: Japanese cinema, genre cinema, Hollywood cinema. So he was a very strong mentor. And of course, he wrote the famous influential article. When he came out of the closet, he had already had a family with grown children, and he had written books on Hitchcock and Claude Chabrol and Arthur Penn and Howard Hawks. And then he came out of the closet and wrote an article called The Responsibility of the Gay Critic, gay art critic. And it was really about, you know, writing about cinema through the lens of being homosexual, you know, as well as a Marxist and a Freudian and a feminist. So he was a huge influence on me. Then when I got into grad school, I took a course called Psychoanalysis and Feminism, in which I had to read, amongst other things, all of Lacan, translated into English at the time, and it was a course where I was the only male student in a class of all women. It was very challenging, but I was always very deeply into Freud and read most of Freud's books, and then the post-Freudians like Marcuse and Wilhelm Reich, So I was always totally fascinated with psychoanalysis, and I still am. I am a photographer, a writer. I do installation work. I do some performance work. So I kind of consider myself an artist, but for me, cinema always comes first. It's for me my strongest passion. And as a child also, I would stay up late and watch the late movies on TV, and they became the window to this extraordinary international world. I would see European cinema and on late night TV, and as a kid, I remember seeing a Bertolucci movie on late night television, or like a movie by Elio Petri, like Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion or something, and it just really opened my mind to things that I would have no access to as a farm boy in Canada, and but all the other stuff that I originally went to university with the intention of becoming a film critic, and but I took production for 2 years to see how films are made. But then I thought it would be too complicated for me to make cinema because it's so technical and it's so expensive, and and I came from a very pretty poor background. So I had to work to put myself through university. I worked at a nuclear power plant. I worked as a waiter and bartender and dishwasher and everything, to put myself through school. And I also roofed houses with my father, manual labor. So, but when it came to doing, I went to York University, which had an amazing fine arts department, and it was very interdisciplinary. So I actually took a major in film and a minor in dance because I was really interested in dance and choreography, which I've incorporated into a lot of my theater work that I've done in the last, 8-10 years. And I also took, courses that had, acting courses, screenwriting courses. So it was a very well-rounded kind of fine arts education that I got at York University, and I've maintained that ever since. When I was in the punk scene, when I was in graduate school, I started hanging out in the punk scene and making experimental films and fanzines, which are Xerox publications. And making the fanzines was amazing. This was all pre-internet, because it was all very like, you made it yourself, Xerox, all the material, made it with collages, and I was a photographer and took pictures for the fanzine. I wrote short fiction, short stories for the fanzine. I did the layout and the cutting and pasting and everything. So it was a very multidisciplinary project to do these kind of small self-published publications. So that stayed with me. I always say that whatever medium I'm working in, it all comes from the same place, and I'm always saying the same thing. The medium may be different, but it really all comes from the same place. And that place for me is usually cinema first, and then having to do with my sort of queer identity and my philosophy of homosexuality, which I think is really important. Not enough people even bother to have a philosophy of homosexuality, and mine is very specific.
Lullaby and good night. In the sky, stars are bright. May the moon's silvery beams bring you sweet dreams. Close your eyes now and rest. May these hours be blessed till the skies bright with dawn. When you wake with a yawn, lullaby and good night. You are mother's delight. I'll protect